Welcome to the Northern Echoes. You are my Boro with myself, Dom Shaw, and Scott Wilson, who managed to squeeze out of probably the tightest press box in the Championship. Is it, Scott, at Kenilworth Road?
It's a throwback Kenilworth Road. I think I said before the game, you don't want to be too disparaging because it takes all sorts. But my thought down there is, how on earth are they going to turn this into a Premier League stadium if they get up? It reminds me a lot of Bootham Crescent at York, which kind of tells you all you probably need to know about where we're at in terms of readiness to host Premier League football there. It's anyone who's been to Luton, it's a remarkable, it's a proper old, decrepit ground in the middle of tourist housing. No kind of parking or anything around it. And then once you're in there, wooden seats. Some of the seats are still those kind of bench seats like you used to get at the old Wembley. It's remarkable, really. Yeah.
Hopefully it won't come to the.
Hopefully it won't come to that.
They need to upgrade in the summer, but they would have.
They are building a new ground, to be fair to them. But I don't think it's definitely not going to be ready next season, and I'm not even sure it's going to be ready the season after that. So they were kind of saying last night, if they do go up, they're going to have to make, a whole raft of improvements to it, which I don't really think they want to do because obviously it's going to get knocked down in 2 or 3 years' time. But I guess it's a problem they hope they're going to have.
We'll have a chat about the injury picture, which Michael Carrick said a little bit more about after the game at Luton. We'll talk about some of the talking points to come from the game and ahead of next week's trip to Rotherham, the penultimate game of the season. Thanks as ever for watching along or listening. If you're listening to this on podcasts, please remember to like and subscribe and get in touch if there's anything you want us to have a chat about. We'll start on last night, Scott. Like we said, you were there. General reaction, first things first. I mean, in terms of the result, it was greeted by a collective shrug of the shoulders, really. But I thought Boro played really, really well.
I completely agree. I think that when you throw in everything that was kind of going on, I mean, listen, the result of that game is an irrelevance, really, isn't it? Boro were never going to catch Sheffield United. They're going to finish third or fourth, or, all things being equal now, probably fourth. The difference between third and fourth means nothing. They're going to be at home for the second leg. So the game, the result was always going to be an irrelevance. With that in mind, when Michael Carrick's team selection came through, it wasn't a huge surprise. It was probably a surprise how many changes there were, and the fact that obviously Akpom and Hackney were both on the bench as well, and you probably suspected that they weren't going to come on, as proved to be the case. So the scale of the changes may be a surprise. The fact that he made changes, not a surprise. But then from that point on, I actually thought Boro played really well. I thought there were so many positives to come out of it. I mean, we can probably get into the nitty-gritty of it, but Howson at centre-half, I thought was superb. A game that, the way it panned out, probably suited him in that I thought Luton were really disappointing, very one-dimensional. At no stage did they really get at Boro and build up a head of steam, so that probably suited Howson. But just his comfort in possession and his ability to get the ball rolling out of defence. He kind of looks like almost the modern centre-half in a lot of ways. He certainly didn't look out of place there. So I thought that was a real positive. Thought Barlaser and Mowat together in centre midfield, I thought they both had good games. Jones looked bright and back on it again. Probably the one who didn't quite step up was Bowler. I thought he started quite brightly, but then I thought he dropped out the game a fair bit in the second half. But I thought Boro were the better side for most of that game. They certainly played the better football. And then obviously they get undone by, a set piece where probably they didn't cover themselves in glory, how they tried to defend it. And then a hugely controversial penalty that I think 99% of people watching would say shouldn't have been a penalty. So if that's the best that a full-strength Luton have to offer, then if Boro are going to end up playing them in a playoff final, assuming Boro are somewhere closer to full strength, which you'd like to think they would be by then I think all the signs last night suggest that Boro would have nothing to fear. But, there's a lot of football that we play between now and then. But generally, I thought really positive.
Yeah, the penalty shout. I mean, it wasn't a penalty, was it? End of. And no,
the only thing I would say, in fairness to the referee, is we're obviously in the press box. It's a fair way away, and it's one of those grounds where there's still wooden poles, metal posts. So it was even in the press box, it wasn't, it was a kind of disrupted view. But on first glimpse, I thought it was a penalty. because you couldn't really see the extent to which Stefan pulled out of it. So I thought in live time it was a penalty, and it's
but then
only
I guess
when you
the
start
obvious
seeing the
thing
replay.
there, yeah, and the obvious thing there is, you're trying to do 1,000,001 things in a press box with a view, with a disrupted view, and you're not a Premier League referee, whereas you've got
that's a very, very fair point.
Who's on the spot.
And then the more you watch it back on the replays, the worse it becomes, really, doesn't it? I mean, Stefan, to be fair to him, my first reaction was, what's Stefan doing there? Because it looked like he kind of half pulled out, but then gone through with it. And as I say, it's only when you watch it back, he couldn't have done anything more to try and make it obvious that he wasn't making a challenge. Yeah, exactly. And yet he's still been undone. So no, it's a really bad decision. As Michael Carrick said at the end of the game, the only good thing is you can have a bit of a laugh about it because it's not going to do any damage to Boro. But obviously, in a different scenario, it could have been really costly. It was a bad decision.
Yeah, Rob Edwards has said that from the angle he's seen, he can see contact, and I'm thinking when I'm reading that he must be the only person who's seen this angle, because there was kind of no showing of that after the game.
Not at all. Like I say, the more you watch it back, the worse it becomes, really.
You touched on it there, kind of the Boro. You'd have nothing to fear coming up against Luton again in the playoffs. My kind of feeling at full time was, despite defeat, Boro's confidence might well have grown going into the playoffs, because, like you said there, they're going to be thinking, well, we should have won tonight. We'd at least have drawn if we weren't undone by a terrible decision. We had our best striker out. We had our key midfielder out. We had players playing in positions they haven't played this season. Yeah. Barley's making only his second start. You could go on and on. Will that play on Luton's mind? I know they've won, but will they come away thinking,
I'm not necessarily sure it'll play on their mind, because, like you say, at the end of the day, they did win the game. And to be fair to them, they've got bigger fish to fry as well. So while they were playing a full strength team, where were their motivation levels at in terms of going 100% for the game? I'm not sure. So I'm not sure Luton will necessarily be knocked by that. But I do agree with you that I think it's got to bolster Boro's confidence. And the other thing as well is, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute, we're not quite sure exactly who's going to be available for these playoff semi-finals. So I think the other thing that it did do was I'm not necessarily sure Michael Carrick would have needed convincing, but if he did, then I think he'll be looking at it and thinking, well, if I have to play a Barlaser or a Mowat or a Jones or a Dijksteel in a playoff semi-final, I'm sure he doesn't want to have to play 6 or 7 of them, as was the case last night. But if he has to make an odd change like that, they've shown they're more than capable of doing it, and they're ready as well. They all look match sharp. That was the other big positive last night. It wasn't like you're looking at them thinking, well, yeah, he looks like a player who's barely kicked a ball in the second half of the season. So, I think that no matter what side Boro have to end up putting out for these 2 playoff semi-finals, they should be bang on it.
I thought it was credit to Carrick and the coaching staff, really, that he have with such a different team, a much changed side. The way Boro were playing, you wouldn't have been able to tell. If you'd have just been dropped in and you didn't know who was playing, but you were watching Boro, then they played with the same style and approach.
Yeah. I mean, there was 5 or 6 passing moves that went on for 1 or 2 minutes where Boro were kind of sweeping from one end of the pitch to the other. That like you say, were as good as kind of anything they've strung together all season, really. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It's shown that what he's instilling into this group of players on the training ground is so well ingrained now that you can change players around, you can tweak the system, you can have a completely new look back four, and yet the football and principles are remaining the same, and that's got to be hugely positive.
Carrick said a few times this season when we've asked him about Tuba that there's nothing really to say that hasn't already been said. Ridiculously, it kind of feels like it's already getting to that stage with Cameron Archer. I don't know what we can talk about here that we haven't talked about in the last few weeks
already.
But it feels like he needs mentioning.
Took his goal really well, didn't he? I mean, it's a brilliant ball from Crooks. We were kind of right behind it, and the way he floated it over, it was a brilliant pass. But there's still an awful lot for Archer to do, and obviously he gets there ahead of the keeper, and even then he's got to show the little bit of composure to kind of steady himself, come back inside and roll the ball home. So, brilliant goal, and I thought he led the line really well all night as well. He's a massive threat, isn't he? He just looks pretty much the finished article, which credit to him, credit to Villa, but also credit to Boro for actually being able to get him as they did so early in January and beat pretty much every other club in the Championship who were wanting him. I think I've said on the pod before, haven't I, that we've watched Ellis Sims and we've watched Joe Gelhardt at Sunderland this season, who are strikers at broadly the same kind of level of their stage of their career rather than Archer. I'd have Archer well ahead of both of those in terms of being ready to lead the line regularly for a Premier League team.
You've done a piece today on his Tuesday on his goal scoring ratio, and it's quite something, really, isn't it? Especially when you consider he's come into a team halfway through.
Well, that's it. I mean, he's not that far behind Chuba. Now, admittedly, Chuba's ratio is much better in the second half of the season than it was in the first. Over the last kind of 20 games or so, Chuba's pretty much a goal a game, really, which is remarkable. But Cameron Archer's better than a goal every 2 games, which, as you say, for a striker who's joined a club midway through a season and doesn't have a lot of experience anywhere, really. I know he's obviously had those loan spells before, but doesn't have the Preston spell, doesn't have a lot of experience. He's really hit the ground running, and he just looks so confident, which is what you want in a young striker like that, isn't it? You know what I mean? He's pretty fearless. He clearly feels at the minute every time he goes out on the pitch, he's going to score, and Boro are reaping the rewards from that.
He's got a bit of niggle about him, which I like.
Yeah.
It's that one where he went shoulder to shoulder with, it might have been, I forget the name of the midfielder who came on. Anyway, he went shoulder to shoulder. Then there was one where he kind of snapped into a tackle from behind in the second half as well. He's
not afraid to put himself about, is he? No, absolutely.
No.
I just think he looks, a little bit of arrogance, but confidence more than anything else. He looks like a player who thinks that,
and he carries it, doesn't he?
Threat every time he gets the ball in the final third. Yeah.
But for all the positives, then the negatives are the injury list, which doesn't really show any sign of easing immediately. Although Carrick does have a good poker face, doesn't he, when it comes to this? But what's the latest?
Yeah, so he does, and he's. I don't think he's ever going to name names and be that explicit about it. But he did undoubtedly last night for the first time go that little bit further in. I think he initially said something in his Tees interview, which obviously we don't hear until afterwards. But then he came in to do the written press stuff with us, and I said to him, "Look, what's the situation here? Do you think that you'll have all of these players available for the playoffs?" And for the first time, he explicitly said, "No, that won't happen. We won't have all the players back for the playoffs." Now, does he just mean the semi-finals? How many? That will come out in the wash. But I think what's clear is there's at least 1, maybe 2 of the 6 that were missing last night that he's working on the assumption that they're not going to play any part in the playoffs. It's a bit of a guessing game, isn't it?
I was going to say, is there any indication as to?
Not really. I mean, my guess would be that the 3 that they're most worried about would be Smith, McGree,
Fry.
And Fry, yeah, just because of the nature of the injuries. Yeah. McGree, ankle. Could it be ligaments? We don't know. They're not saying that. But if it is, then he would definitely be out the playoffs. But even so, whatever ankle issue it is, it's going to put him touch and go at best, I would have thought. Smith just looked a bad one, didn't it? And the fact he was kind of straight off the scans, ribs. Yeah, I mean, that, if there's fractures there, then that would be him out of it. So that's obviously a worry. And then Fry is just the fact that it's kind of such a long running one now that, they're being really coy, and they've been really coy about it from the start, suggests that there's something, there's got to be something fairly serious there anyway, hasn't there, just for the amount of time that he's been out. Of the other ones, Force just seems more like an accumulation of little niggles and knocks and things. I suspect he'll be all right. Ramsey seems to have been saying on social media that he's, pretty confident he'll be all right for the playoffs. Everything I hear suggests that that's not as serious as it maybe looked at the time. So hopefully that will be all right. And then McNair is another one that's a little bit of a mystery, but seems to have more chance of getting back than Fry. There's a degree of guesswork going on there, but that will be my take on it at the moment.
Yeah, Michael Carrick's doing his press on Friday again this week, with it being a Monday. So we'll obviously find out more there. Now we haven't. This is our first one, our first video, our first pod since the Hull game, because obviously we had Massimo on at the end of last week, didn't we?
We did.
So we haven't. We talked about Isaiah Jones's return against Norwich, but he's kicked on since. you know, he was brilliant from the bench against Hull. He started against Luton, and Anthony Dijksteel too, who I thought was really assured and unlucky for the goal last night because there was a bit of you know, tactical blocking going on in the box when the corner came on. I mean, that's not a bad reserve second string right side to have in your locker, is it?
No, absolutely, and you know, it seems like that right side is probably the one where the biggest worries are at the moment, with Smith out, Force question marks, McGree and Ramsey, who could play over that side as well. And like you say, I mean, you know, there's an argument that a fully fit and focused and firing Isaiah Jones starts ahead of all of them anyway on the evidence of where he was last season. And you could make the case with Dijksteel as well. So no, you know, I think that's an area of the pitch that no matter who is in or out there, I wouldn't be too worried about it. I think as long as you get one of McGree or Ramsey back, that's okay. The worry, for all that I thought Howson did great last night, is probably centre-half. If McNair and Fry were both to be ruled out of the whole of the playoffs, and your only option is a Johnny Howson there, then that's, you know, for all that he did brilliantly last night, and I think he can definitely do a job at centre-half, would you want him to have to do it in all three playoff games? And then where on earth do you go from there if one of him or Lenihan then picked up a problem within the playoffs? That would be the big worry, I think. You know, they definitely would want one of McNair or Fry back, wouldn't they?
Because I think it's the double whammy, isn't it? Of Howson, so assured at centre half, but he isn't a defender, and it's a different ball game if you have I don't know, say you're playing Sunderland and you've got Amad Diallo and not necessarily with Howson in defence, but what you're missing with him not being in midfield. I think that's the thing, isn't it? Now I know Mowatt's come in and done a good job, but he's not Johnny Howson. There aren't many in the Championship who are they? You know, it's disciplined.
No, absolutely. And I think the other thing is that, you know, while Howson kind of ended up there for a little bit, hadn't he, at the end of the whole game, it wasn't obvious that was going to be how Boro were going to set up last night. So for all that Luton might have had a little inkling that it might have been, they couldn't really set up a game plan around the fact that Johnny Howson was at centre-half. Now, if Howson plays at centre-half in the next two games and there's no indication that McNair or Fry are anywhere near, then clearly, if you're the team going up against Boro in the playoffs, you're identifying that as a potential area that you can really look to exploit, aren't you, if you know in advance that that's what you're going to be up against.
The playoffs then, we every week we have our chinwag about who's going to get in and who you want to play.
I think we're going to get in. I don't think they'll finish top two.
So we're recording here before Blackburn play Burnley on Tuesday. This might well have gone out. You might well be watching afterwards. So the landscape might have changed ever so slightly. Sunderland beat West Brom to climb to 6th on Sunday. Coventry won to climb to 5th. Watford are out of it now. Chris Wilder's Watford have had a shocker, haven't they? But Swansea are suddenly in the picture. You know,
I mean, Millwall obviously wobbling badly, but are still there. It's fascinating, isn't it? It's absolutely, you know, it's wide open. I mean, like I say, all things being equal, we're doing this before the Burnley game, but Burnley 1, Sheffield United 2, Luton 3, Middlesbrough 4 now looks pretty nailed on, doesn't it? It's who's going to be 5 and 6 and who are Boro going to be facing in that semi-final. I mean, we've kind of talked about it, then we've said it looks like it's off the equation, but clearly the one that is exercising all Boro fans' thoughts at the minute is Sunderland, either in a semi-final or a final. Just because that would be some event, wouldn't it? Everything that went around it, you know, if it was a semi-final and you've got Boro going to the Stadium of Light, then Sunderland coming back to the Riverside. I mean, those two games would just be, you know, ridiculously good atmospheres and just crazy. But then you think, well, what about a Wembley meeting and 30,000, 40,000 of each, Trafalgar Square the night before, London the day of the game? And then it's even exacerbated by the fact that now it's been absolutely confirmed. You've got the final on the Saturday at 4:45. And then on the Sunday, Newcastle are at Chelsea for their last game of the Premier League season, potentially getting in the Champions League. So there'll be about 10,000 Newcastle down as well. So, I mean, let's see how it plays out. But if any of those scenarios came to pass, it would, I'd be interested to know what die-hard Boro fans would think about it. From a journalistic point of view, I think it would be amazing. It would be extraordinary. A Northeast playoff semi-final or final would just be, everything around it would be great. Would you want that as a fan? I don't know.
I mean, it's an awful word, isn't it? But it's a narrative, isn't it? And that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's that extra layer. It's that extra layer of almost.
Would you want the opportunity to go down to Wembley and beat Sunderland and get promoted, or would the thought of potentially going down there and losing to them mean you'd just rather be playing Coventry in a final that was just a normal run-of-the-mill final? I don't know. It's an interesting one.
It's funny because it's felt like, for months probably since Boro lost there in January. I think it was January, wasn't it? Yeah. It's felt like, just imagine if. Whereas you looked at the table at the weekend. I mean, Sunderland are unbeaten in 7 now. They've timed their run to perfection. They've got Watford at home on Saturday, and then they're at Preston on the final day. But you looked at the table at the weekend and thought, by God, this could happen. This it's not a probability yet, but it's certainly nudging on from being a possibility.
Likelihood significantly in the space of a week. Now, in another week, if Blackburn were to win on Tuesday night tonight, and if Sunderland then go and lose at Watford at the weekend, the picture's completely changed again. But it's there at the minute, isn't it? And to be fair to Sunderland, I mean, I've obviously been writing pieces in the last 24 hours about Boro's injury issues and stuff, and kind of tweeting them out and everything. And Sunderland fans have been kind of bombarding it by saying, heart bleeds for Boro. We've had half a team out pretty much the entire season. To be fair to them, they have. I mean, you look at the number of players they had out last weekend. I know you did the game at West Brom, didn't you? But I mean, that result for them with the team they put out, they've got on some kind of roll. So strip everything else out of it, just from a purely footballing point of view. I'm not sure that Boro would massively want to face Sunderland at the minute, because they're the team who over the last month who have, really had the wind in their sails. Probably them in Coventry, but Sunderland, are they unbeaten in 7?
Unbeaten in 7, yeah. And you'd say there about injuries, and this is going to be a factor going into the playoffs, because Boro do have their problems. But you mentioned there, Sunderland are without their captain, their centre forward, they don't have any fit centre halves. You could go on and on. But West Brom also, they've lost DK, who's the latest in a long list of players to lose, and they've kind of faltered at the time when I was expecting them to come good. Norwich as well, and Norwich, we saw the state of Norwich's defence when they were here, and they've faltered as well. It still feels like there's an element of, and Sunderland and Coventry obviously are in form, but it still feels like there's a possibility that someone might almost fall into the playoffs. If Blackburn were to get a couple of results, they'd go in, but they're not going to go in with any real momentum.
Absolutely. And you do, I know we kind of probably, are we putting something there that's not really there? But you do wonder if all of these late season injuries are in any way related to the fact that the World Cup obviously break was there, and it's concertinaed the first half of the season and the second half of the season, that because the unlike the Premier League that's obviously stretched the season out by pretty much a month nearly, the Championship's ending when it would have ended anyway. So there has been a real concertina of it. Is that a factor? Maybe, although obviously maybe it's just the fact that come the end of the season, any season, clubs, their injury lists are mounting, because that's just the way it works in the Championship every year. You just don't necessarily notice it when you're not bang up there with something to play for.
And still, and on the back of, I know this sounds ridiculous, but the COVID seasons, it feels like the whole fixture calendar has been playing catch up for a couple of years. So there hasn't been what you'd class a normal season for 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah, but it does feel like you said, there's a lot of clubs that seem to have got a lot of injuries all at once, and obviously Boro are one of them, having really not had any for the whole of the season to a large extent.
Team selection then, but to wrap up, Rotherham on Monday, Coventry the final day, another Monday. What do you think he'll do? Is that an indication as to things, or might, because you've got you've got Rotherham on Monday, then you've got the possibility that you might well be playing Coventry 3 games in a row, depending on how the table.
That's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? I think that for Rotherham on Monday, it will be largely what we saw last night. I think Akpom and Hackney will both come back and play.
Yeah, I think so.
He's not going to rest them for 3 games in a row. I don't see any likelihood of him rushing, bringing back any of the 6 who are out unless he's absolutely confident. Now, Coventry on the last day is a little bit different because you've got a few players. Let's say that Dale was to suddenly become available. You clearly want to get him a game because it's been so long since he played. Someone like Ramsey, all right, he hasn't been out for a long time, but he's a young lad. He had been getting some momentum up. I think you'd want to play him. So I think that the injured players coming back, I think we'll see them probably against Coventry if they're anywhere like. I think the Rotherham game is probably another one where he's going to massively err on the side of caution. And if it has to be a team pretty much like we saw last night, just with Akpom and Hackney restored, that might very well be what we get.
Before we wrap up, I think the Coventry game, because I think there was an element last night of obviously kind of resting players, but I think there was also an element of, well, we're not going to give you the perfect kind of front row scouting opportunity. And depending on how the table looks, I think there's a chance that that'll be the case again on the final day. If I think he's more likely to go closer to full strength for the Rotherham game than he is the Coventry game.
Maybe I just the only.
But then there's the dynamic if you don't want to lose to Coventry before playing the game,
and you're at home. Yeah. And it's the last. I know there's a semi-final to come, but it's the last home game of the regular season. You imagine it'll be a pretty big Riverside crowd. It'll be a good mood. Like you say, do you really want that to fall absolutely flat and then head into the playoffs on the back of that 1 week later?
But I think what we saw last night was even if he does have to play a slightly different team, he'd still back that team.
You'd still get a performance. So that's a fair point.
Then there's the other kind of, and I know Boro have earned the right to do this, but Rotherham are fighting for the lives still at the bottom of the league, and Coventry might well. So there might well be that element of Carrick not wanting to. Yeah. But again, he's talked again and again about trusting his team, hasn't he, and trusting his squad.
I'd be surprised if we saw players being rested in the way that Akpom and Hackney were last night. I don't see why he would take any kind of a risks with the 6 that have been out, unless it's someone like a Fry, where you think, well, we need to get a game into him before the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think when I said like closest to full strength, I mean those who are available. Obviously, I don't think he'll take any risks with getting them right. It's such a balancing act, isn't it? Because you want them fit for the playoffs, but then equally, it's a dangerous game. Them coming back in, say, for a playoff game, having not played in 5 6
exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. You know what I mean?
In an ideal world, you want to give them a run out, don't you? At some stage.
But by the time we get to the semi-finals, even I think by all soundings, McGree is probably one of the ones who's not going to make it. But if he was to be, he wouldn't have kicked the ball for the best part of 2 months nearly. By the time we get the playoffs, you know what I mean? So. It will be a balancing act. It'll be interesting to see what he does.
Takes me back to Patrick Bamford hobbling around the Wembley pitch, and that.
You remember that? Yeah, that was a real Willie or won't he for 2 months leading. I mean, and to be fair, he hadn't been right, had he?
No, but then he's the championship.
Everybody kind of knew that he wasn't right, but I guess. That's the judgment call. How important is that player to your team? And Aitor clearly decided, come hell or high water, Bamford was going to be the kind of one he was going to hang his hat on, didn't he? And obviously it didn't work out.
Bamford was Player of the Year in the Championship that season. Obviously, Tuba won that award on Sunday night at the EFL Awards. The MFC Foundation also won the Diversity
Award,
for their work, for their Dementia Project work, which I know from speaking to those involved has had a huge impact in the community and does a lot of incredible work. So congratulations to all concerned there. Hayden Hackney just missed out to Alex Scott for the Young Player Award. Michael Carrick to Vincent Company.
I think to be fair, it's not exactly saying we called it because it wasn't exactly the hardest thing to call. But I think when the nominations came out, we said, well, Company will win it and Akpom should win it. So I don't think you can argue with either of those, can you?
No. And I haven't seen a lot of Bristol City, but Alex Scott got rave reviews, hasn't he? Although I'd seen Ahmad Diallo didn't seem too impressed. The Sunderland player who was also tweeted words to the effect of who or something like that.
Deary me. That'll come back and bite you at some stage. It really will.
Hayden Hackney was a little more respectful. Congratulations to all winners and all nominees. And we'll be back later this week having a look ahead to the game at Rotherham. If there's anything you want us to discuss.
That's you heading there, isn't it? New York.
Yeah. Press conference on Friday, so we'll have probably have a chinwag after that. Get together after that. See if we can piece together any more of the injury jigsaw.
Yeah, absolutely.
And look ahead to Monday. So thanks again for watching and listening. Remember to like and subscribe and do get in touch if there's anything you want us to have a chat about.
Yeah, have a good week, everyone.